Welcome to the Zachrilege cast, Professor Stephen. And we have kind of Professor Stephen coming to us from the past in glorious black and white. If you're not watching this in video, you're missing out. I'm just saying.
Hey, how's it going?
It's going good. I know you're a science-ish guy, so I grabbed a beer called Gravitational Wave, although the reflection's kind of bad. Russian Imperial Stout brewed with smoked cocoa nibs and raspberries.
That sounds delicious and also a great name, since we've just basically recently gotten some good evidence that such things as gravitational waves exist. So
Well, that's good.
Cool.
I'm sure that this does, in fact, exist.
Yeah, it seems to, yeah.
The "Are you there" joke. But as we like to start out, well, it depends on the guest, but definitely in this case, it fits. We're going to do some out-of-context quotes from Professor Stephen back in the Atheists on Air days. And if you don't know what Atheists on Air are, well, you're missing out, and you're going to find out. So here we go. Someone's shitting their pants. The gays causing tungsten to fall apart. We use letters from the alphabet. And the last one, atoms are sexist.
They are, yeah. They don't like anything that's different from them. They like things that are similar. Yeah.
So I originally met Professor Stephen at the second ReasonCon, because that was the first one I went to. And you did a recording, and I think I had the highest blood alcohol content of the people you interviewed that night. But
that's quite a feat.
It was a contest.
Yep.
There were a lot of people there, and it had a reputation, and I tried to live up to it.
You did.
But I wanted to know, diving into the Professor Stephen past, what was your own religious background growing up?
Oh, I was raised in the Independent and the Southern Baptist Church. So in Western North Carolina and pretty much all the South, I guess at this point, one of the number one denominations, in fact, the number one around here, is Baptist. And the difference between Southern Baptist and Independent is Southern Baptist has a connection with something called the Southern Baptist Convention, where they have sort of an organizational body that sort of, they're not terribly controlled, not like the Catholic bishops or even the Methodists, whatever they got. They're sort of a loose association that sort of comes up with ideas and literature and stuff. And Independent Baptists are the ones that are so contrary, they don't want those people telling them what to do. And so they're a completely isolated church, but they basically have the same doctrines. You know, they're biblical literalists, salvation through faith, and God hates fags. Basically, those are your big your big flags that they plant. And I grew up in that church, so basically fundamentalist Christian asshole church.
Well, what came first, you deciding that you didn't believe in that, or your amazing fashion sense?
Actually, my amazing fashion sense. I sometimes would dress like this for church. And in the small independent Baptist churches around here, often the only person in the church with a suit on would be the preacher. And so I would sort of stick out like a sore thumb. In fact, I had one visiting evangelist who was a very judgmental, sour sort of person who just went around just hating on anybody that wasn't exactly like he thought they should be. Saw me wearing I believe I was wearing a purple double-breasted suit coat with navy blue pants with a green check and a bow tie. I can't remember what the bow tie looked like. I think it was blue. And he just stared at me like I had walked into church buck naked with a frog on my head. Like, he just gave me this scowl of, who the fuck are you to be different from the way that we are? You know, it was real. Like, I'm the preacher. I'm the only one supposed to wear flashy suits. It was really weird.
Yeah, I was guessing a lot of people, I don't know. I hear the theory about, people wear their Sunday best.
Mm-hmm.
But for some people, their Sunday best isn't that great, and maybe that's an advantage that the preacher will have. Is that what the official term was? I mean, it seems like each denomination has its own for their spiritual leader.
Yeah, we would call him preacher or pastor. Pastor was often used. Pastor meaning something along the lines of shepherd. You know, the Christian propensity for calling themselves sheep, which cracks me up. The Baptist church is very much an American style, even though it came out of Europe. The Baptist church that we know and hate or love around here is very much an American version of Christianity, and it's very dressed down. It's very individualistic. It's very, I don't want no fancy schmancy holy man to tell me what to do. It's very anti-intellectual. And so you'll often hear Baptist preachers rail against not just Catholic churches, which they think are of the devil, but other Protestant denominations like Methodist that have like robes, like their leaders wear robes or priest collars. They'll lambaste that from the pulpit, saying that it's wrong, saying that it's being like the Pharisees, trying to look big and special and apart from the people. But the irony of that is that in most of these little Baptist churches, the pastor is the one wearing the flashy suit while everyone else is just wearing a collared shirt or maybe even a t-shirt. So the pastor still has a special outfit to set him apart. So he doesn't have a pope hat. So what? He still has a special outfit that says, hey, I'm the preacher, right? And that's the suit in this case. Although the difference is that if you really want to, you can wear a suit to church. But most churches I grew up in were for very poor people. There's different kinds of Baptists, rich people Baptist and poor people Baptist. And in poor people Baptist, it was almost valued that you didn't dress up. Like that was being flashy and showy, and only the preacher is supposed to do that. But you were supposed to wear your best, but not be flat. It was a little hard. It was like being between like a televangelist and like an Amish person, being between those two extremes. We never knew exactly how to dress for church.
Although I guess there was an expectation, right, for what you'd think someone was going to look like.
Yep.
Who's leading?
Yeah, well, it all depended. When I was younger in the Southern Baptist Church, it was perfectly acceptable to dress up, and most of the elders of the church would wear suits. But whenever I got to the little independent Baptist churches, which were so very much more backwoods, anti-intellectual, anti-showiness, it was much more common for no one to dress up except for the pastor. Maybe one or two of the bigwigs in the church might as well. And of course, I was a weirdo, and I dressed up anyway, and I dressed up very flashy. And most people were perfectly fine with that, to be honest with you. They didn't mind. But that one pastor gave me the dirtiest of looks I've ever gotten because of it.
But you shirked your religious, but you didn't get rid of your clothing sense, I guess.
No, why get rid of the good part just because you got rid of the bad, right? No.
What was it like, the journey kind of out? Because from what you told me and what you were talking about on the show was that you're kind of a black sheep in your family, and you come off as like a liberal Christian because that's kind of what you have to do. But what made you, because everybody or a lot of people in your family are that way, how do you just decide, this isn't me?
That's a good question. It's not a spur of the moment thing, yet there is a moment where you stop believing. But that moment is a long time coming. I think some of it starts with the fact that my parents, as much as they were sort of and still are brainwashed about religion, even compared to other Christians in some ways, they still at the same time were a little bit strangely open-minded. And I guess part of that sort of got taught to me by accident, not meaning to. I guess they were a little more open-minded about subjects like that. They were humble in a way like that most Christians aren't. Like they wouldn't assume that they were right about everything. They would, seek out the opinions of other people and experts and things like that. And so even though I was brought up to be a hardline Baptist, there was a tinge there of being a more humble intellectual person. And even though my parents weren't very highly educated, my dad was a very good student in school. Maybe that's where that came from. But I learned early on to value truth regardless of consequences. Like, it doesn't matter if you don't like that it's true. That doesn't make it not true. And that wasn't enough, though, to get me out of the religion. In fact, I doubled down on it. When I started doubting my religion, when you doubt your religion, you do one of two things. You either double down on it or you start to go away from it. I doubled down on it in high school. I went crazy. I got out of my parents' Southern Baptist church and went to my best friend at the time's Independent Baptist church. So my parents' Southern Baptist church, Southern Baptists, from most people's perspective, are extremely conservative. But I think that there's turtles all the way down. I think there's no end to this. You can always find someone who thinks that they're more conservative than the next person. Southern Baptists, for instance, won't let women be preachers, but yet they kind of will. Like, they're beginning to change on that. They use different versions of the Bible besides just the one King James version. things like that. They become a little more open-minded compared to, some of the others. And so the independent Baptist movement in general, there might be some that are more liberal, but in general, they rejected these liberal ideas that the Southern Baptists were espousing, which were not very liberal. I mean, just a little modicum. Oh, maybe a woman could serve in the church. Maybe you could read a different version of the Bible. But so I went to a church where there was King James only. That's the only Bible allowed in there. Everything else was of the devil, where women were only allowed to teach children.
I was wondering how they justified. I mean, obviously the King James Bible is pretty old. I mean, it's what, 500 years? 1600s, I know. But it's clearly not, well, whatever the original is, that's not.
No, it's not a very good translation. If you actually study it, it's a pretty poor one. But the rationale for being King James only, it almost makes it kind of logic. It almost makes it kind of sense. It goes like this. Historically, the true Christian movement, Baptist and things like Baptists, have used the King James Bible because it was the only one available in English at the time. 1800s, the two Great Awakenings, the Great Revivals, all that stuff. And that proves the power of that book, because so many people were converted to Jesus through that version of the Bible. It has the God magic on it. It's a holy one. And the argument that convinced me is, what version of the Bible was preached when you got saved? I'm like, it was the King James. Well, there you go. That has the magic in it. That has the mumbo jumbo. They would never use the words magic or mumbo and jumbo. They said it has the Holy Spirit running through it. That's the inspired one, or the most inspired one. You can tell that because the proof of the pudding is in the eating. It's converted more people than any other version, which isn't probably a true fact at all.
Well, it could be whatever, I guess, version. But that was interesting, because it was like, well, if Baptists are so cool, why weren't they, or maybe they were based on what they think the original version of the Christian church was, which is definitely not what people are doing now, just based on Republican politics. But
yeah, so yeah. That's true. This is also another conspiracy. So the King James, the Baptist Church is full of conspiracy theories. And one of them is that all the modern translations of the Bible were translated by Luciferians and Satanists and New Agers in order to dilute and pervert the Word of God. And the other is that the modern Baptist Church is the direct descendant of the original church of the apostles, and that it's been maintained all the way back to the time of Jesus. Now, this has been thoroughly debunked by historians 100 years ago. But it doesn't matter. They're still passing around pamphlets and little booklets saying that the Baptist Church is the true church of Jesus. And since the Baptist Church uses the King James, and they're the true church, and they're the only ones that have the real believers, and the only ones that really go to heaven, and the King James is the only Bible that actually gets you to heaven if you read it. It almost makes sense if it wasn't completely crazy.
Sounds like a lot of religions. And a friend of mine on Facebook earlier today suggested that, the earlier days of the kind of atheist podcasting community had a lot of atheist Christian debates. And they're wondering, why don't we have more Christian debates, especially different denominations, like where they disagree? That'd be almost more interesting, just to see where they all disagree, because they all seem to be unified when it's time to vote, but they don't really agree with each other. All these attacks on the Catholic Church by like Protestants, like, hey, they've been around. They were around the first 1,500 years. You guys are like the Johnny-come-latelys. You can dress it up all you want, but it's
I recall my old pastor talking about the term Protestant. He used to say, Baptists aren't Protestants. We're not protesting anything. We never came out of anything. We were never part of the Catholic Church. So that's part of that myth. They deny that they're a Protestant denomination. They are a Protestant denomination. They come from the Anabaptists who came out of the Catholic Church. There's no denying that historically, but they just form their own history, and then they publish that in their own books and say it's true. And so the Baptists around here don't even claim to be Protestant. They claim to be original, or whatever you want to call it.
Well, how long have you been in Asheville?
Well, let's see. I've been in Asheville twice. So I moved back about 4 years ago. Got a job here in Asheville, as some listeners on the podcast. If there's anyone out there still remembers Atheists on Air, towards the end there, and yes, I'm saying towards the end. I've been meaning to bring it back. I don't have the heart anymore, and I have other personal reasons why I can't. towards the end, but there might be something in the future for the patrons, however it's said. One last big hurrah. We'll see. I moved back to Asheville. I moved to Asheville and got a job in the piss lab. That's what I was getting to. I mentioned on the end of the show where I was testing urine for drugs. I always called it the piss lab. And then I lost that job and went through some pretty hard times. And that was sort of when Atheists on Air started to disappear. I just didn't have the stomach for it anymore. Didn't have the time for it. Didn't have the mental. I was mentally exhausted. And then I got another job here in the Asheville area. And now I'm working testing drugs, but not in people. Testing drugs have been made for going into people, and been doing that for about 3 years now.
Well, how did you get into science? I mean, you did talk initially about your dad kind of being pro-education.
Yeah, my mother was also a school secretary. Yeah, my mother was also a school secretary, and so she was very much pro-education as well, which was different from most people in our church. Although they still believed that the earth was 6,000 years old and that evolution was a lie. Although they didn't double down on that. I mean, they always believed evolution wasn't true, because that's what you do whenever you're a Baptist in North Carolina. But they never really, when it come to the age of the earth, they were like, oh, we don't know. There's just some things we don't know. So they were a little bit more open-minded than most. But yeah, they valued education, and I found that I had an aptitude for, I had a higher than average IQ. I was good at figuring things out. And so I enjoyed solving puzzles, so to speak. And math bored me a little bit, though, to be honest with you, because there was a lot of memorization in the math class, and I didn't like memorizing things. I never have. And that's actually held me back a little bit in my career. But I always like solving problems. And then I started watching movies and television shows, and I like the aesthetic of a scientist, even though most of it's bullshit. But I like I like the glassware and the white lab coat, and they're usually depicted as eccentric and a little bit nutty, but I kind of thought that was cool. I always liked scientist heroes. There are a lot of scientist villains, but I always like scientist heroes and things. There's not a lot of them, but there are a few. And I always I want to be that guy. That's like the closest thing you can be to a wizard in the real world. And so I, unlike most people, decided I wanted to be a scientist at a very, very early age and started looking into it. And I realized that chemistry is the one that fascinated me the most because you made things with it, and you mix things in boiling flasks and all. Turns out most of that stuff's not the way it actually really is, but I started to pursue it and just continued to pursue it until here I am. I'm doing chemistry, but I'm not making stuff. I'm analyzing things because it turns out I'm better at teasing things apart than I am at putting them together.
So you're all about the destruction.
Yep.
You did talk in an episode, and this is when you had Aaron Ra on Atheists on Air. Applause, everybody. Applause. There you go. Applause is over. Okay. But you talked about how chemistry, and I think that was something that Rachel talked about, was like chemistry is really hard for her because you kind of got taught it different ways. And when you're in college, you had to kind of relearn it because they would teach you kind of a theory that didn't quite work. Like, is there a way that like your education, like from high school on, doesn't really set you up to succeed in a science curriculum in college?
It really does depend. A lot of schools don't teach science at all very well. And of course, now that we're being defunded by the government who doesn't value education and wants to destroy it and just privatize the whole thing, we're not getting a lot of funds. Chemistry is an expensive thing to teach because you have to have chemicals and you have to have glassware and other demonstration models and things like that. It's not something that's easy to teach just with a blackboard. And if you don't have those things, it becomes very boring very quickly because they end up just memorizing a bunch of shit. I remember I was in honors chemistry, and it was a lot more fun than the regular chemistry courses that most kids took. While we were in honors chemistry, we were doing reactions. We were fiddling with things, and the people in the regular chemistry courses were just memorizing the periodic table. And I thought, what a fucking waste of time. Oh, we can cuss on this podcast, right?
Yeah. Surprised we waited so long. Yeah. Come on. You used to curse all the time.
I know. I've mellowed a little bit. I thought to myself, what a fucking waste of time memorizing the periodic table. It'll be on every wall of every lab and in the back of every chemistry book you've ever seen. And if you become a chemist, you'll just have memorized some of it by default anyway. And so that really is annoying. Chemistry's taught very boringly. It's taught just balance these equations, balance these equations. And I actually enjoy balancing equations because it was solving a puzzle, but I'd already been introduced to it, and so I could do it real easy. But if you're not used to it, it's not very intuitive sometimes. A lot of people get frustrated with chemistry because it doesn't click right away, because it involves some lateral thinking in a way. Like, it's not just math, it's also solving puzzles with math, and that can be frustrating to some people. But also, yes, they teach you simpler models of the atom and molecules at different stages in your education. And theoretically, they should build on one another. And you should say, oh, okay. Like if you're in elementary school, you take a general science course, they may teach you that electrons are these little particles that orbit the nucleus like planets orbit the sun. Is that true? No, it's not true. And I don't know. It's just true of all sciences, by the way, especially the physical ones. You don't just teach kids relativity and quantum theory either. You teach them Newtonian mechanics, and Newtonian mechanics isn't correct either. But it's an approximation, and you have to build on that approximation. So, do electrons spin around the nucleus like planets orbit the Earth? No, they don't. But for a little kid, that's good enough to start out with. But making it clear that this is just an approximation and there's a lot more to it, and maybe this isn't exactly true. Maybe they don't get that across, and so when they find out later that no, electrons are more like waves that are doing their wave motion in a sphere around the atom, that might bother them a little bit. But I was told they were particles. Well, no, they're more like waves. They're more like they vibrate. And then whenever they find out, well, they're not really either one. They're kind of both. They kind of act like both. And in actuality, they don't really orbit. They have energy levels, and those energy levels are discrete, and they have quantum leaps between them, and they're actually made out of probability distributions. And it can. But you can't. How are you going to teach a 12-year-old about probability distributions? I don't even completely understand them. Right. So you have to build on it. You have to start out with simpler explanations, and then build on them. And I think you'll find that true in most sciences, biology and physics at least, right? Like you could talk about how the cell in the human body is the simplest piece of a human that is that type of tissue. But whenever you say that, you haven't talked about all the organelles and things inside the cell that do things. And, biology is a little more discrete than chemistry and physics, I admit. But both chemistry and physics, you have to start out with simpler models. In fact, most synthetic organic chemists use models for their reactions, for how chemicals interact, that are not actually true. They're just more simplistic ones that are easier to use, that usually work. So they're practical. And when they don't work, then they say, oh, it didn't work. We got to go use the fancier one.
You have to start at a lower level and then kind of build on that. Yeah,
kind of like you learn, like you don't go, when you want to talk about how a car accelerates, you don't go straight on to relativity. You don't start talking about time and space and how speed causes time dilation and all this, because whenever you're at these low speeds, it doesn't matter. That stuff's not really that important. We can just talk about Newtonian physics, about force and acceleration. But Newton was wrong. Like we can talk about gravity. We can calculate the force of gravity, but gravity is not a force. Einstein has shown that gravity is the bending of space-time. But there's no need, if you're doing even most rocket science does not require going to relativity and including those equations in your math. You can do something simpler that's just close enough. And that's the same thing with the simpler explanations for the models of atoms and molecules. For your understanding, and even for some actual practical laboratory experiments, you don't need a more rigorous model. You don't need a deeper explanation. It's close enough to work. But it's hard to get that across to kids that what they're learning isn't true, but it still kind of is, right? I don't even know if I've gotten it across here exactly how important these simplified models are.
That's true. I mean, I can't compare it to religion. I just got a random question out of left field, since you are you enjoy your TV scientists. Yeah. You've definitely gotten this question if you haven't even watched this show. But if you tell somebody that you just meet that you do chemistry for a living, do they immediately ask you if you could do what Walter White did in Breaking Bad and become a drug kingpin?
Yes. Can you? Yes.
And the answer, of course, is I can't tell you enough to kill you, right?
No, the answer is no, I couldn't, because my specialty is analytical chemistry. I could tell you how pure that meth was. I could sure tell you how pure it was.
Okay.
And it wouldn't be as simple as it's in the show.
Sure.
Yeah. But I can't make it. Now, sure, I can find a recipe online. I'm got enough background in chemistry, even though synthetic chemistry is not my forte. I did take it. I did do it. I used to think that's what I wanted to do for a living and found that I didn't enjoy it. I could make meth, sure. If I could get the starting materials, I have no idea how to get those. I could bumble through it and not probably.
You said you had a cold today. You get started. Just go to a bunch of different stores and buy Sudafed.
Sudafed, yeah. I mean, maybe one day just for the hell of it, I'll try.
Excuse me.
No, that's not a good idea. No. Yeah, I mean, I've synthesized things before in my parents' basement in the kitchen. Not drugs, just chemicals, and I could do that. But on the scale of Walter White, no. Okay, well, there's some unrealistic things in that show, but
you don't say.
Yeah, he's a genius synthetic chemist who was able to make a friggin' pilot plant producing super pure meth using 4 or 5 different alternate recipes. No, I couldn't do that. I don't have the skill to do that. Walter White, the fictional character, has the skill to do that. But yeah, I could make meth or acid or any of that crap if I really wanted to, but not easily. It would take a lot of me getting the books out and relearning a lot of chemistry and then trying to find ingredients. So yeah, sorry. I know it was trying to be funny. Yeah, people ask me that shit all the time. Pisses me off. That's the short answer.
Yeah, but see, the Walter White character, he had the hat.
It's a pork pie.
You already have the outfit.
I have a pork pie hat.
Yeah, well, of course you do.
Yeah.
You probably have one for the winter and the summer, right? You can't just wear white. I think I forget.
After Labor Day.
Well, we've done all the science talk. We haven't even gotten really to Atheists on Air. We want to talk about this because I feel like people don't know where they came from if you do an atheist podcast. Like, I'm sure a lot of people do podcasts now don't even know the show existed. And if they do, they barely have heard of it because it's a show that was on a few years ago, but it was really influential. And you get to you get to switch. So take the chemist hat off and put the historian hat on. So the original episode of Atheists on Air was October 20th, 2013.
Mm-hmm.
And it was Cash and Jen, who I believe was also known as Love, and someone known as the Tank, who I don't know who that was. So either. How did you get introduced to the show?
Well, I knew both Cash and Jen from the local atheist community. In fact, Cash and I were in a local atheist meetup together. In fact, I was friends with him. I was there. Actually, I was at a meetup of the Asheville Skeptics whenever he said he wanted to start a podcast. And he said, is any of you smart guys interested in being on it? Because a lot of these guys are science nerds. And most of them were like, you're never going to do anything. You're never going to start a podcast. He's talking. And I said, sure, that sounds freaking great. I'd love to be on it. And said, you want me to just do like a segment? Like I'll come in and I'll be like Professor Steven and I'll talk about snake oil or, he's like, yeah, the snake oil woo-woo. So I was like, that sounds good. I'd love to do it.
Wow. A star was born.
A star was born, exactly. And it turned out he lived near me. So he'd done a couple of episodes and he's like, hey, do you still want to be on the show? I'm like, yeah, I still want to be on the show. So I would come in while they were recording and just sort of slide in to the desk there. He recorded in a little outbuilding and wait for my turn and then do a little snake oil segment for him. And that was pretty fun. I had to do a bit of research. I learned some biology I didn't know. And then, alas, stuff happened and there was a falling out between Cash and Jen. I won't go into all that, but it was Cash's show and he decided that he didn't want her as a co-host any longer. And eventually he asked me if I wanted to just co-host the show with him. And I said, absolutely. I always had a secret desire. Like part of I like TV scientists and movie scientists isn't that I like them as scientists. I like them as characters that actors play. Part of me always wanted to be an actor or a comedian. And so when I was a kid, I used to do fake radio shows on my tape recorder. Right. I used to pretend to be an interview DJ or something. And so the opportunity to be on a show as a co-host was very appealing to me. And Cash is a hard act to follow. He's really charismatic and really funny. I try to be funny and also bring some science to the show. I think the two of us did some pretty good shit together. I think that personally, in my opinion, those were the best shows when it was Cash and I.
Is there a way, I mean, you kind of already did describe it, but like to describe Cash, I might have to like find a rant of his and like include his audio in this show just to get people maybe a shorter version of his rants, but just
he was a lovely
how he talked, because you're from North Carolina, but you don't have like a super strong accent, but he does.
He sure does. Cash was a lovely combination of things that should never have gone together in one person, and I love him for that. He was definitely someone who was raised to be the North Carolina redneck stereotype.
But he was Mormon, right? Is he from North Carolina? Because I'm like, where did the Mormons get to? Well, they get everywhere.
They're everywhere. There's Mormons. They're not a lot, but they are around here. And yeah, he went from Mormon to sort of mainstream Protestantism. There's a relationship there. Any kind of revival preaching televangelist type. There's sort of a relationship with that in Mormonism. Like a lot of people that don't get out of religion but get out of one going to the other. People that tend to experiment with religions, you find them flipping from one to the other. But yeah, he had some sort of strange Mormon North Carolina backwoods upbringing, and you can listen to episodes. It was bad. There was bad consequences. But this is a person who is extremely charismatic and quite intelligent, who was raised in an anti-intellectual, superstitious home. With a lot of his family are still, maybe not Mormon, but they're still into stupid religious organizations and other even snake oil bullshit, medical pyramid schemes and things like that. Like that's just where he came from. But he came out of it. He realized it was all BS. I mean, he also fell for a lot of. I think one of the reasons he liked the snake oil woo woo was because he fell for a lot of that stuff early on in his life. And somehow he saw that it was BS and got out of it and put his mind towards learning what was true instead of a bunch of crap someone told him. And he was smarter than he ever gave himself credit for. He's got sort of raw intelligence that wasn't tempered by an education, but he definitely learned how to think and became very angry about the things he lost because of his religious upbringing.
Yeah, the first episode he says we're not firebrand, then he immediately says, "Just kidding, we are."
Yeah,
because that I was like, wait a second, is that the right person? But how did you get? Because you met Cash, of course, in person, so you did a show. Mm-hmm. But how did Rachel get added, and how did you get a female paleontologist on the show?
Rachel got added through Cash. Shortly before Cash bowed out, he added her in. He somehow got in touch with her and said, "Hey, would you like to be on the show as sort of a permanent guest or co-host?" And she had just left. I believe it was David Smalley's show.
Dogma Debate.
Yeah,
can still say it.
Yeah, and she came to us, and we did a few with the three of us, and it was pretty good because it's always funny to have Cash react to nerds talking about science. And like I say, very charismatic. Cash is the kind of person that owns a number of cowboy hats, smoked Marlboro cigarettes, drinks Jim Beam, knows how to clog, has a number of pair of cowboy boots, owns a pickup truck, and is a left-wing atheist intellectual. So figure that out, right? And his sort of anti-religious or anti-theist country boy thing is refreshing. It's really something, which is also something that I think that a couple of other friends of the show have weaponized on their podcasts. But I found it interesting that you could take sort of the culture of the South, the fun part, the woohoo, part, and remove all the bigotry and racism, sexism, and religious bullshit from it, and have something lovely left over. And I love that about it. I wish I was hopeful that my own state was heading towards a more progressive South, and then the last few election cycles have sort of hit that in the head. But we won't go into that.
Oops.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, for those who have been waiting, going, when is the next Atheists on Air show going to be? Well, guess what? Professor Stephen prepared a kind of a mini snake oil woo-woo segment.
Yep.
So feel free to take it away.
I will take it away, but first I'm going to open.
Did you have the music?
Oh, I don't have the music. Sorry.
I was like, wait a second. Who was the guy with the accent who did like the? How did that?
Yeah, Cassius.
That show was one thing about Atheists on Air is like I just talk and whatever and throw in my own music, but you had little segment breaks and you had people who did the voices for it who weren't in the show, so that was good.
Cash was a good podcaster. He his day job involved doing things online, doing programs online, and he knew how to do some things that a lot of other podcasters don't. And he hired a guy to do those voices for us, and we said, "Do I have that?" Just real quick, it's right in front of me. I might actually still have that. Colin, I do have the Professor Stephen intro. Oh my God. Okay. Let me see if I can send it to you real quick. While I'm doing this, I might as well say I also have a rant as Cash would call them. I called them the fulmination when I took over. No one liked that. I don't think it ever took off. But that's okay. Let's see. Let's see what happens when I just hit this.
We probably ought to do this.
And now.
Okay. Oh, output. Was it coming through? Was it coming?
Yeah, I could hear it.
I couldn't hear it on my end. So
yeah, it was coming through. I heard Cash talk, and then it was the introduction, the music, and all that.
All right. Well, here we go. I'm going to hit it again.
We probably ought to do this.
And now the moment you've been waiting for. Hailing from the cesspool called college with his liberal, commie, hippie, pinko, spy education, Professor Stephen attempts to spread the disease of reason, the virus of logic, while shoving a bit of science in the face of woo. Welcome to the Snake Oil Woo-Woo Science segment.
Perfect.
All right. So, first of all, start with my rant. My little rant here. Very short. Why the fuck has, over the last 4 years, have anti-theist, atheist activists, specifically on YouTube and other places, started to defend and do apologetics for people who are avowed theocrats or are allowing theocrats to set their policy? What the fuck is going on? How can you be more against your own self-interests than you as an anti-theist atheist supporting theocrats and trying to advocate for people to vote for them? I don't fucking get it. It's people that used to go and take down creationists are now, I guess, taking down the libs and the feminazis. And I guess they hate feminists so much, especially ones with red hair that scream at, that are like 20-something years old, that scream at people on college campuses that will amount to nothing. That they hate them so much that those are equally as bad as people who will actively destroy our freedoms as atheists to not practice their religion, who will install theocrats on the Supreme Court, who will, I think, eventually try to overturn Roe versus Wade. But I guess it doesn't matter since most of these people are men anyway. What the fuck's going on? Okay, enough of that. That's my rant.
What the fuck is going on?
Yeah, I don't understand these theocrats. How are you supporting theocrats as an anti-theist? What the fuck? Anyway, That's since the last episode of the show, this is what's been bothering me more than anything. I'm not even mad at Christians as much anymore as I am at our own community.
I'm wondering if I might have to bring on Professor Stephen for like a monthly rant. I feel like rants, you might have something to get off your chest. We'll talk about that, but that was good. That was good. I like that. Good energy.
Okay, so here's my snake oil woo-woo. So we're going to talk about a little thing called vitamin B17. Okay. Now,
as I said before the show, clearly 5 better than B12. So
exactly, right,
it has to be good. Just based on math. You said you didn't know math. I think you don't know math. So
I know math. I just don't like it. I use it all the time. Every day. Love math. Math is the best thing that humans ever invented. We got the best math. But I never really enjoyed the courses in school. They bored me. And that's just the truth. I had to sort of slog my way through them. Although I did find geometry quite interesting. Anyway, so vitamin B17 is a particular chemical or mixture of chemicals, not really sure, that's being sold by a lot of people as a cure for cancer, as either a cure for all cancer or a preventative measure for cancer. Now, what is vitamin B17? Well, you'll find that they promote that it is found in the pits of various fruits, apricots being the most prominent one, apple seeds, bitter almonds, and other fruit pits and stones. And they say, so they tell you got to eat like so many apricot seeds a day, and it'll cure you of your cancer or prevent you ever getting it. And I was first introduced to this particular bit of snake oil when I was quite young, and until I started researching again, I'd forgotten. My uncle had prostate cancer, and he started planting fruit trees in his yard. He started spent a lot of money on apricot trees because he'd heard that apricot pits can make cancer go away, can make it die off and go into remission. And he started eating apricot seeds. Now, I don't know. I wasn't that close to he was actually my great uncle, not my uncle. Wasn't that close to him. I don't know if he did this in lieu of getting actual medicine. I don't know that, but I suspect maybe. Even so, he wasted a lot of money planting apricot trees in his yard, which are now, I think, all dead. What B17, what is this? Well, they make out like it's a vitamin, B17, after you heard of the other vitamins, B12, B6, all those. It's not a vitamin. That's just a lie. Okay, the actual chemical is called amygdalin. And amygdalin is a natural compound found in the pits of various fruits and in bitter almonds. Also, sometimes you might hear people talk about it with a different name, the name laetril, or laetril or laetril. Laetril is a patented synthetic cousin that a doctor created, or Dr. Ye was a doctor, I suppose, created back in the 70s. The thing about amygdalin is that it's poison. It's very simply poison. It's two sugars. So what it is, it's something called a glycoside. A glycoside is a very interesting compound you find in a lot of plants. There are many different kinds, and some of them are very useful for medicines. Glycosides, excuse me, are basically sugar molecules where they've taken a sugar, where nature in its chemical factories within plants have taken a sugar and added another chemical to it, and it's bonded to it. And the other chemical is usually something that does something. It's reactive. It's bioreactive. And whenever that sugar other thing is digested or in some other way treated in the body, it splits the sugar off, and then the active chemical is left to do its thing. So most of the time, the active chemical isn't active when it's attached to the sugar, although sometimes it still is. And the sugar actually just helps it dissolve in water and go to places in the body where it can't go. But sometimes it's deactivated by being attached to the sugar. And then when your enzymes in your body digest it, the other chemical pops off and it can do what it can do. Well, that's what amygdalin is. It's two sugars. It's two glucose sugars attached to each other, then attached to a chemical compound that's got a benzene ring and a carbon triple bonded to a nitrogen. Well, whenever you digest this, it cuts off the sugars and turns those into glucose, and it's perfectly fine. That part's perfectly fine. It turns it into glucose and digests it, and then the other part pops off, and the other part spontaneously decomposes. I say spontaneously. I don't know if it's completely spontaneous, but decomposes readily into two different chemicals. One of them is called benzaldehyde, which is a fairly safe chemical. It's the characteristic almond flavor. That's artificial almond flavor, basically. It's not terribly good to have a whole, you wouldn't want to drink an entire glass of it. It would probably make you sick, but a little bit of it doesn't hurt you. So that's not really a problem either. The problem is the other compound that it pops off and turns into is cyanide. Just cyanide. Just hydrogen cyanide, like we used to use in executions and to gas people in the war. And so you don't want to eat amygdalin. You've probably heard that if you eat apple seeds, you can get cyanide poisoning. I know that's pretty common knowledge. There was even a G.I. Joe episode where they had a blob, like the blob kind of blob that was eating everything, and they killed it by having it eat an entire grove of apple trees. And the cyanide in the pits, the apple seeds killed it. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. It produces cyanide. So the original idea when this stuff was originally created back in the 1800s was that maybe it could fight cancer. Maybe it would get into cancer cells and release its cyanide and kill the cancer cells. which is not a bad idea. I mean, that's not a stupid idea when they first discovered it. Why not? Why it might. So what do we do when we're scientists? We test things, right? So we tested it, and we found that it doesn't go to cancer cells and release its cyanide. It goes to all the cells and releases the cyanide. So the myth that was perpetuated, the belief was that there was an enzyme in cancer cells that was in a high concentration, that was in a very low concentration in the rest of the body, and that this enzyme would cause the cyanides to be produced to a greater degree in cancer cells than in the rest of the body. Well, it turns out that's just not true. I won't go into all the chemistry, but these enzymes exist in all the cells. The problem that when you want a chemotherapy drug that attacks cancer cells, you want it to attack the cancer cells more than the rest of the cells in the body. Ideally, you'd want something that only attacks cancer cells, but we've never developed that. So when you have chemotherapy, basically you take poison, but the poison is more poisonous to cancer than it is to the rest of your body. And the hope is that the cancer will die out before you do. It's terrible, but it works sometimes. It has cured people of their cancer or made them go into remission for the rest of their lives even. This is not one of those things. This is not preferentially poison cancer. It poisons your entire body. And it's pretty awful how it poisons them. So there's this enzyme in every cell of your body called cytochrome C oxidase. And so I won't go into all of it. It's very complicated, but cytochrome C oxidase is one of the enzymes responsible for doing all the complicated chemistry that allows your cells, every cell in your body, to take oxygen in and use it to burn fuel. So if you fuck with this enzyme, you will no longer have energy in your body. Your cells will start to die because they're a little energy making mitochondria. Every cell has a little mitochondria in it, which is a little energy pump that runs the cell, the generator. Suddenly there's no fuel going to the generator, and your cell dies. And it kills every single cell in your body by doing this. But a lot of our cells have sort of defense mechanisms for this and can maybe survive it for a while, are not as prone to be susceptible to this. The ones that are badly susceptible to this, though, are our nerve cells. So cyanide goes in your blood, goes to your nerve cells, shuts down their generators, and cyanide your nerve cells really don't like their generators shut off, and you start to die. Your nerve cells start to die, and your heart stops. And it's bad news bears.
It's not good. It's bad.
It's bad. It's not good. It's bad. That's right. And the other name for it that you hear, the Laetrile, is a synthetic version of this where they take the chemical and they pop one of the sugars off. So it's just a single sugar attached to this thing that turns into cyanide rather than two. It just means it's more concentrated. It just means there's more cyanide there, right? The body does the same thing with it would do with a natural chemical. Well, there were a lot of quacks through the years that tried to sell this stuff to sick people and claim that it cures cancer. And the FDA did its job and banned the shit. You can't do that. Thank you, FDA. Although there are a lot of people trying to get that overturned. They're trying to take away the FDA's ability to enforce it. There's a lot of people on the political right that are for deregulation of drugs, of medicine, which I guess they want to send us back to the good old days of actual snake oil, where anybody could claim to cure anything with anything. The most recent thing I noticed is that there's something called the Right to Try bill that President Trump just passed that lets sick patients bypass the FDA for unproven treatments if they're terminal.
Yeah, I heard a lot of woohoo to that, in a lot of cases it's a lot of woohoo hope leading to woo-woo.
Yeah, exactly. It's basically allowing snake oil salesmen to get past the FDA. We already have laws about right to try. We already have those on the books, but the FDA had to review them to keep parasites from bleeding the funds of people that have cancer in their lives or other diseases. This is to get around that oversight, basically. And while maybe 99% of or 95% of drugs that even get past stage one end up not working. Like stage one, I have to explain all that. 95% of drugs that get manufactured out there, new drugs, don't end up working. So you're really more than likely going to try stuff that doesn't work than you are that is going to work. It's because stuff that it does work tends to be pushed through a little quicker than stuff that kind of doesn't. And even then, the stuff that does work may have such terrible side effects that it ends up not being worth doing anyway. So you've got maybe a 1 in 100 chance that the drug will do anything at all good, and a good chance it'll do bad things to you. So when you're dying, why not take the crapshoot? Why not roll? Why not, if you got a gun, one bullet will kill you and another bullet will kill or will save you, and you're dying of cancer anyway, you might as well spin the revolver and pull the trigger. But in this case, it's not doing anything except for taking away a layer of protection for people who are desperate. This isn't going to improve anything. People are going to desperately seek out cures that probably won't work in the hopes that they'll miraculously come up with one that will. And I haven't heard of anybody. There's probably been a case where this has actually worked, where someone did an experimental drug and it actually worked. But the FDA normally looks and says, oh, there's promise to this thing. We recommend you do take this. It might work. As opposed to, this is complete bullshit. You shouldn't do this and waste your money. Go look somewhere else. They're getting rid of that oversight, basically. And that's not good. There's nothing good about that. It's not going to help people. It's not going to increase their chances of getting cured. It's going to decrease them. And of course, when it comes to any of this snake oil sold to cancer patients, the fact is there's a recent study that was just done that shows that people who rely on alternative medicine, what they call alternative, which isn't alternative because it's not medicine, alternative and wooey medicine like this, this is not so much woo as some of the other things like homeopathy, but people who rely on that are more likely to die of cancer. It's just a fact. I think it was, I don't remember the exact numbers, but significantly more likely to die of cancer. Only because they stop using the treatments that actually work. And one of the reasons why, and that speaks to one of the reasons why the thing got banned by the FDA for being sold in America. There was a child who had, there was a child who had cancer, who actually was going to. I've lost my tab. It's happened every time on the show too. I'd always in a snake hole. I would always lose where I was.
Some kind of technical issue during the show. I mean, you get nostalgia.
Yeah, it's nostalgic. All right. Publicity. Let's see. Well, anyway, I can, off the top of my head, there was a child who was suffering from a very bad form of cancer. I think he was 10 years old, and his parents put him on chemotherapy, and it was working. It worked quite well for him, but then for some reason, the parents were convinced that they needed to stop the chemotherapy and put the kids on this chemical instead. And the irony of all this is that if this chemical did work, it would be chemotherapy. That's what it would be. It would be a toxin that preferentially goes to cancer. Turns out it doesn't work. But once someone claims that something may work, you can never undo the belief in the gestalt of the human bullshit that covers the entire planet, that it does work. Like, you can't get rid of that idea. Like, as soon as someone claims something works, you can never get rid of that claim. Like, there's going to be some group of people that are going to say it works no matter what the evidence are. That's what happened here. It was just, this may work. It turns out it doesn't. Oh yeah, but it does. I refuse to believe that it doesn't, because my cancer cured up. That's a lot of it's always testimonials. My cancer got better. People go into spontaneous remission all the time. Also, what were you doing besides that drug at the time? It's cognitive bias. It's counting the hits and ignoring the misses, which happens a lot with cancer because misses are dead. So the testimonials, the people who survive get to make the testimonials. People who didn't survive, they're dead. So it's really easy way to filter out all the negatives whenever you use just testimonials and not actual clinical research. Well, anyway, long story short, this kid was taken down, treated with this, and died. And it turned out he didn't die of cancer. He died of cyanide poisoning. Although it's being covered up, and the doctor who treated him claims it was the cancer that killed him. But this was the impetus for the FDA to ban this mess. The thing is, though, you can't ban seeds. You can ban people from saying they cure cancer, but you can't ban seeds. And so rather than taking the synthetic one, now we have all these people advocating eating a bunch of apricot seeds all the time. Some notable people who sell this are Kent Hovind, the asshole creationist.
Sounds familiar.
Yeah, well, I mean, he's a crook in so many ways. He might as well be a crook snake oil salesman while he's at it. He believes that the Bible says that God gave us all the herbs to cure all the diseases.
Did he appear in the show, or did you just play his stuff and talk about it because
I played his stuff because I wouldn't have the man on, man. Ken Ham, some of those other guys, like I don't like them, but I'd be happy to have him on the show. But I believe Ken Holman is kind of evil, and like he's a conspiracy theorist. He's a fraud. Went to jail for tax evasion. He's a sovereign citizen. We can go into that for an hour and a half. He shills snake oil. I mean, I don't think the man is worthy of being on any podcast. Same thing for Alex Jones, for that matter. So Ken Hovind shills these eat the apricot seeds because he believes that God made a cure for all diseases in nature. That's not even, and the thing about that, it's not even in the Bible. Like that's not even justified by Scripture. That's just something that crazy Christians believe. Another person so I started looking into this after realizing they were poisoning cancer kids and getting very angry about it. And I went to online to see, what would happen if I just typed in B17 into the browser. Well, mostly I was happy with what I got. Of course, it's my browser, so the first thing that comes up is Wikipedia, and then chemistry references from legit chemistry sources. But then after that, I scrolled down to see what other sources for this, what's being said out there. Most of the stuff that was from legitimate like cancer societies were like, this is shit. It poisons you. It's not worth anything. Stop it. Although maybe there's some new chemistry we've discovered that may be useful if we combine it with other things. We're looking into that because, scientists are open-minded about even testing snake oil more than once to see, because it is an active chemical that maybe if it's combined with some other stuff may be useful. But don't take it in its raw form. Eating seeds will not cure cancer. It will just give you cyanide poisoning. Of course, most people don't get enough of this to get cyanide poisoning. They just eat seeds. But some people believe the lie that it prevents cancer and give it to the children. And that's where I get very angry, because you can poison a child with apricot seeds. It happens. It's even happened in Turkey where they eat them as a part of their diet. There have been kids that have eaten a bunch of apricot seeds and had to go to the hospital because of cyanide poisoning. Don't give your kids seeds like this. It's bad. So looking through all this, most of it was positive until you got to like the Mercola website comes up. And of course that's shilling it because Joseph Mercola shills every kind of snake oil that you could ever imagine. But most of the pro Vita B7 amygdalin things are videos on YouTube, because that's where bad idea goes to fester, is YouTube. You go to YouTube, you can find every stupid crackpot idea in the world. And so I watched a couple of them and I realized these videos are being made by two men. One is named G. Edward Griffin. And he wrote a book about it. I don't want to even tell you the title of it because fuck that guy. He also writes books about how the Federal Reserve System is secretly evil. He denies books about how HIV/AIDS is not true. He supports the 9/11 Truth Movement. He's a JFK assassination conspiracy theorist. He believes that the biblical Noah's Ark is located in Turkey, and he also makes videos about chemtrails. And this brings me to a point I want to make, and then I'll shut up about this particular piece of snake oil, is how stupid, false bullshit is never seems to just be alone and by itself. It's always overlapping. And I've noticed that conspiracy theories, snake oil, woo-woo, fake medicine, and religion, they just go together so well. They're just right. There's so many people that have all those things together. This guy believes he found Noah's Ark as well as shows this stuff. Well, the other guy in the video is named Ty Bollinger, and he's a gigantic conspiracy theorist. He writes books about how he doesn't even believe in the germ theory of disease. He doesn't even believe germs cause diseases. He's an anti-vaxxer. He's also a gigantic, hey, I'm a Christian. Oh, religious. Every time I go into one of these snake oil things, I scratch the surface, I find religious people. It's almost like being religious makes you open to conspiracy theories and snake oil woo-woo. And I will say that it does, because before I became an atheist, I also fell for some bad ideas in the realm of conspiracy theories and bad science. I was a creationist, and I also bought it. I'm pretty sure I would have been eating apricot seeds if I were still a Christian, because I would have watched Ken Hovind and I'd have been eating them.
So speaking of Christians, if you had a choice, you had to be stuck in an elevator for a couple hours with one person, would it be Pastor Roy or would it be Duncan Waters?
Hands down, it'll be Pastor Roy. Okay, because Duncan.
Maybe not you though.
No. Okay, Pastor Roy might get a little handsy, but I would have a great story to tell afterwards. And I'm pretty sure Pastor Roy wouldn't get very aggressive, and he seems like a sweet man. Duncan Waters is an asshole, and he would probably just yell at me that I was going to hell the entire time. So I would probably pick Pastor Roy.
Now, I've heard rumors, of course. I famously was drunkenly on your podcast on ReasonCon 2, and then ReasonCon 3 happened. ReasonCon 4 is still happening next year. Yep. Will you be there?
I will be there. Go ahead.
Will you be representing?
I will be representing. I don't know whom, but myself mostly. Yep. I will be there. I've been to everyone so far. I have no reason not to come to this one.
Now, you've made comments about, Atheists on Air, that there still is a missing episode of the show.
Yes.
Will this show ever surface? And is there a way for people, are people still supporting? Because I don't know if there's still a website out, if there's still ways for people to check out old episodes of the show, and
I think
what's going to happen with how are you going to get closure, man?
Yeah, I've been struggling with Atheists on Air for a while, inside of my own mind and heart, if you will. I've been worried about it and worrying on it, and frankly, I don't have the time or the will to continue the show. I've been trying to convince myself to start it over again, and I've come to the conclusion I just can't do it. It's got to be done. But our website, our Facebook page, are old moldering wrecks that I need to either get rid of or fix. We still have a podcast feed with old episodes on it, although I'm pretty sure that not all the old ones are on there. Full disclosure, one of the reasons why Atheists on Air is over is, first of all, Cash will not be coming back. No one else is really willing to take it over that we would approve of. There have been a couple of coups that have been attempted by people of that would like those YouTube videos that I've been talking about. And frankly, I'm still in the closet with my atheism with a number of people, including my parents. I basically approach my parents as if I'm a very liberal Christian who is questioning the Bible. And I've gotten to think about a few things, but I cannot. They're in their late 70s, and it would destroy them if they found out I was a rabid atheist, anti-theist. In that podcast, I am not mincing words about how I feel. I think religion is terrible. I think Christianity is terrible. And if my parents hear some of the things I say on that, it will kill them. Well, my aunt found the show on YouTube. Whenever Cash, and this is funny because I'm on YouTube now, when Cash decided to do the YouTube feed, I was trepidatious because I was trying to keep my anonymity. I figured Professor Stephen was enough of hiding my name, even though my first name is really Stephen. A lot of people have that name. Maybe someone would recognize my voice and say maybe that's him, but they couldn't be for sure. But when he put the YouTube feed in, I was like, should I tell Cash that I don't want to do that? I thought, well, what's the chances that one of my Christian family or friends are going to see this? This is just a podcast that gets handed around to atheists and agnostics and stuff. Of course, also Christian apologists. So my aunt discovered the show and saw me on YouTube. And this is called a cascade of horrible things. I'm known back home as basically that I suck the devil's cock. I have that I supported, including one who was the one bisexual relative that other people kind of secretly hated on, who I supported, but she was also a devout Christian. And then she, unfriended me on Facebook and cut off all communications with me. I've lost some family and friends, but my parents never saw the show. My aunt was going to show it to them, and I had to take the Facebook down, or the YouTube down. And ever since that, every time I start to get the podcast together again, I get trepidatious. I get scared. I'm not in a place where I can do it right now. It's going to affect my life too much. What I will do, because we have patrons who have pledged money, and thank you for that. It helped a lot. I've actually accrued a little bit of debt trying to keep the old episodes on, but that's okay. I'll soak that. I want to get together a package. I want to get together, if I can, if I can cut out some time in my schedule to do this. I want to find all the episodes of it, both video, YouTube videos, and the audios, and I want to make them available to the Patreons as a package. So a private YouTube channel with all the YouTube videos and then all the audio for download, including the final missing episode. That's what I intend on doing now, and go out with a bang like that.
Seems like a good bang. And I think one last bang we could use this episode is, I believe you have a joke.
Oh, yes, I'm always full of humor. I have a joke. Here's my joke. There was a Catholic priest, a Baptist preacher, and an Orthodox Jewish rabbi who regularly met up to brag about their successes in their respective religious pursuits. One such meeting led to a debate about the best way to convert people to a religion. By the end of it, the three religious leaders had made a bet. Each one of them was going to go into the woods and find a bear and convert it to their religion. Each were confident that God was on their side and they could do it. The next day, they met up and went in 3 directions into the woods, only to return 4 hours later. Upon returning, the Catholic priest, with a pious look on his face, says, "I've seen a miracle. I've been part of a miracle. I have converted a bear cub to Catholicism. He's part of the Holy Roman Church now. I went into the woods. I found a bear cub all alone in the woods. I christened him in the name of the Lord, and then I gave him Holy Communion. He took the communion, and also part of my forefinger. But that's okay. You have to sacrifice in the service of the church." And the Baptist minister says, "Son, that's no way to convert people to the Lord. The way to convert people to the Lord is with the pure, unadulterated word of God, preached in the inspiration of the Holy Ghost. So that's why I went into the woods, and I went down by the river, and I found a bear, not some child bear, not some little child. You have to get him young, brother. You have to get him young. I know. But I found an adult bear. And that bear was steeped in sin and shame from his life of debauchery. And I preached the word of God to that bear. And not only through the Roman road, but I was on the chapter about Adam and Eve whenever that bear went and spontaneously baptized himself in the river. And he's now converted to Christianity." And then they turn around and there comes the rabbi. And he's just covered in head to toe with bandages. He's just bleeding. He's in terrible shape. And he looks at him and says, "Maybe I shouldn't have started with circumcision."
Yep. That's not the way to go. You
No.
go soft and go strong after that.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that joke.
So is as someone who's kind of semi-anonymous, is there a way for people to reach you? I have not said your last name because I don't know if you want that included. That's totally up to you. If you want to just be Professor Stephen, people will be able to find Atheists on air otherwise.
That's fine. Yeah, you can still find Professor Stephen on my Facebook Professor Stephen page. I don't check it very often, but if you leave a message, I'll see that, and I can get in touch. I'm going to start building some stuff up. I want to start, for the big bang at the end of Atheists on Air. But right now, I'm kind of semi-incognito. But yeah, Facebook Professor Stephen. I'm still there.
But what about this other show of yours that's coming up?
Oh, well, see, this will be the first announcement of this.
Haven't talked about this yet. Yeah.
No. Don't feel betrayed, Atheists on Air listeners. This is not another atheist show. My podcasting experience has left me with the equipment and the ability to do a podcast. And my friends, 2 of my friends are very interested in doing one. It's going to be light. It's not going to be an atheist podcast. It's going to be a food, cigars, and alcoholic beverage podcast. We're calling it 3 Fat Guys Talk About Food, because my 2 other friends are also overweight. And basically, we're going to go to restaurants in the Asheville area and the surrounding counties, have a nice meal, come back, pour a drink, light up a cigar, and sit down and talk about the meal, the cigar, and the drink. We're going to describe it in detail, give our thumbs up, thumbs down on all 3, tell a few jokes. And if it gets political or religious, both my friends are also atheists. That will happen spontaneously, but this is a very off-the-cuff, low-key, just for fun podcast. And if no one listens to it, fine. We're doing it for our own fun anyway. Although we do hope you will listen. You
should definitely listen. And I got mad at fellow ReasonCon attendees last time because I thought we did a Friday to Sunday thing, and then people started showing up on Thursday. And I was like, if ReasonCon happens next year, I almost want to go to Asheville on Wednesday and be in Asheville for a couple days and then go to Hickory, North Carolina.
That sounds like a good idea.
Because Asheville's pretty good. Lots of breweries, lots of good restaurants. They have this river thing. It's a kind of weird town for North Carolina, but it's very nice. All the places I ate and drank at were quality, mainly because Professor Stephen told me about them. So, well, thank you for being on the show tonight. Thank you for coming out of semi-retirement for this.
Thanks for having me on the show, and I apologize to all your Atheists on the Air fans. It just went the way of all flesh, but there are newer and better things ahead.
Show must go on, as they say.
Thanks again.